Hey folks, welcome to the channel Thinking Theology, which I'm probably going to change the name of the channel because some folks have gotten confused that thinking theology means believing theology, establishing theology, belief in God, what have you. It's not. It's anything touching on a theological subject, whether it's anti-theological, atheistic. Case in point, the video that I'm doing here, I'm curious about this. I haven't seen it. 3 types of atheism. And we have agnosticism, we have atheism and such, but I don't know how this gentleman, Clay Routledge, is going to break it down. And I got this video from the Big Think channel, and they've got like 16 million subs on their channel. I've done a few things from them, and they do really good work. So we're going to find out what Clay Routledge has to say. And if you're a Christian or a theist of any type, somebody who believes in God, it's just explanatory. You can understand what's going on out there. I'm agnostic, okay? I understand both perspectives, why there's belief in God. I ran in hardcore Christian circles for quite a while, a couple decades ago, well, a little more than a decade ago and earlier. My very deep research and work kind of was my undoing in ways because I saw too many challenges to the very foundations of my faith in ways. And I wasn't looking for that, believe me. I was not looking to contradict what I believed, but my work, it was just too obvious. But that said, I understand why people have hope in a heaven. I understand parts of the Torah, if you will, and the law and what that is about, and how the New Testament and what belief in Jesus' return is about, and whatever people believe. I understand that. I respect it. And I also understand very much the atheistic viewpoint because there are very valid or good reasons in any case for that perspective. I want to find out what 3 types of atheism are. So let's see what Clay's got for us. Here we go.
Atheism is typically thought of as being a binary idea. You're either a believer or you're a non-believer. To be an atheist is to entirely reject belief in the supernatural or belief in a god or a deity. But I actually think that it's a much more complex and much more interesting story. Even among atheists, there's lots of different ways of conceptualizing this idea. For instance, some atheists say that it just means that they're not religious. And it doesn't even necessarily mean that they have no interest in spiritual ideas or practices, but that they just reject traditional religious dogmas. Other atheists actually can be thought of as being what's referred to as emotional atheists. They actually have a very negative feeling towards the divine, which is interesting because it suggests to be angry at something means at some level to have a concept of its existence. Other atheists are what you might refer to as perhaps social atheists in that they feel like there's no reason to have a public religious tradition, or they have no interest in the cultural religious practices, but are themselves interested in spiritual questions and even questions of the divine. So there's lots of different ways that atheists think about themselves, think about each other. There's lots of different ways that believers think about atheists. It's often a very abstract concept, even though it seems so simple. Teleological thinking is really any type of thought process that involves assuming that there's purpose or design. And so it turns out that even though this really is a form of supernatural thinking, right, to assume there's some sort of grander purpose to things, that atheists aren't immune from this type of thing.
Teleology is sort of just as an interjection here, is the idea that things are working their way toward an ultimate perfection. I think Aristotle had that view that things were working themselves bit by bit. Instead of entropy breaking things apart, that wasn't Aristotle's language, entropy and things going from a state of higher order to a state of higher disorder, things are falling apart. But the notion was that things are actually coming together to fulfill their ultimate purpose. So within each cell or molecule, in one sense, you might conceptualize it as it is sort of acting in a certain way toward perfection rather than imperfection or disintegration, as entropy ultimately would suggest, generally speaking.
For instance, in studies of atheists who are asked to describe certain life events, they frequently use teleological language in their written description of those events. So, for instance, they might say, I didn't get this job and it wasn't meant to be, as if there's a part of human nature, even if people consciously reject the supernatural, that pulls them to these ideas. Yeah. In some instances, our own conscious awareness of something or our own conscious beliefs may not tell the whole story of the way our brains work. There is some research focused on atheists and their lack of belief and the implications of that. They asked atheists to say things that shouldn't bother them because they don't believe in God, such as wishing God would do harm to their friends. Now, believers don't like saying this stuff. And indeed, in these studies, when believers were asked to say that, if they complied, they immediately expressed that made them very uncomfortable. When atheists were asked to say these things, they reported immediately that it didn't bother them at all. But what's interesting about these studies is the researchers didn't just rely on people's self-report. They actually hooked them up to equipment that measures a physiological response. If you start to look a little bit deeper beyond self-report, a lot of times the body tells a different story than what we consciously report ourselves.
Fascinating.
When it came to measuring their physiological response, atheists looked indistinguishable from theists.
Wow.
One of the biggest challenges that I think creates conflict between hardcore religious believers and hardcore atheists is a misunderstanding not just of each other, but of themselves. Hardcore atheists think that they're not at all guided by supernatural ideas and concepts, but we know from research that they do have a tendency to engage in teleological thinking, to see things in terms of design and purpose. Likewise, on the other side, hardcore believers often think that most of their life decisions are guided by their spiritual nature, when in fact, like atheists, they also rely on evidence and science. They often have the same struggles, religious questions, and uncertainties that other people have. It's easy to divide people into groups over something that seems so powerfully different about people, such as whether or not they believe in a God or a particular religious tradition. But if we take a step back and try to look beyond these surface level differences that seem like they should divide us and turn us against each other, we'll see a deeper part of the human condition that really is a story of commonality and a story about what it means to be a complete human trying to live a flourishing life.
Oh, that was good. That was good in large measure. I mean, because I am sort of conciliatory. I'm a guy in between two sisters growing up. They never got along. I got along with everybody for the most part. Had your squabbles here and there, as siblings do, but this is more the way I see it as well. And ideologically, that's why when there are ideological differences, there's nothing that says instantly that we must dislike one another because we have different ideas. I think what happens is we don't know what the other person is thinking and how hardcore and entrenched they may be in their ideas. So the fear and discomfort gets in us, or it happens in political circles, if you will, just in daily life. If you're a Republican and you don't know if the other person's a Democrat, or you're a Democrat and you meet somebody, you don't know if they're Republican, and you're trying to figure it out, in part, not because you yourself are going to disengage from them, you just don't know if they're out of control in their ideas and if they're going to reject you. So you don't know if you're in for a battle at a lovely social event somewhere, or on the grocery store line, or wherever you might be. So you're sort of hedging your bet. It's part of survival instinct and pattern recognition just to be able to make your way through the world with less discomfort. So we try to anticipate, is this going to be really unpleasant? So we sort of guard ourselves against it before knowing anything. And I think that affects us more psychologically and emotionally than the actual disagreement does. But we misattribute it to the fact that I can't stand the other political party, or I can't stand the other religion, or the lack of religion, or any group that we can dichotomize. Like he said here, there really isn't just one type of atheist. There really It isn't this continental divide between theist and atheist. There are commonalities in there. And I love the notion of, and I hadn't heard it put this way, that when atheists are asked and hooked up to equipment to come up with an idea that I hope God gets my enemy, takes revenge on my enemy. Like, they dislike that as much as a Christian does or a religious person does. And that kind of stuff is fascinating when you see the quote unquote scientific evidence or some other study, such as a polygraph, which is what they showed in the video here. But also MRIs show neural activity in the brain when people pray or when they just think about God or think about a religious topic or something. Certain parts of the brain light up, and that is what it is to be human. So, what is he, an existential psychologist? Is that what it said about Clay? Anyway, the Big Think does some fantastic work. I love this because they did not take a dogmatic stance. They just present new information, which is what I do on the channel, is to sort of open our minds to getting along better with one another, just in having more civil discourse, not in trying to convert somebody to your view, to your religion, lack thereof, or scientific view of anything. Just share information and let other people make up their minds. And as long as they're not dicks about things, we can all get along pretty well. Anyway, leave your comments, folks. Please subscribe if you haven't, and we'll go from there. I'm going to be doing more on this too. Have a great day. See you on another video. Keep thinking theology.